The last child had stopped crying 3 hours ago, not because comfort had found her, but because her small body had simply run out of tears. Admiral Saren Voss watched the sleeping refugee through the medical bay window, her four arms crossed tightly against her silver-blue scaled chest. The girl was 7 years old and had already witnessed the destruction of everything she knew. 47 ships remained. 47 vessels held together by emergency patches, desperate prayers, and the stubborn refusal of 2-3 million Dravani to simply give up and die. The flagship carrier Whisper of Dawn groaned around Admiral Voss as she walked through its corridors, the ancient hull protesting against the void that wanted to claim them all. Admiral, life support is failing on the Gentle Rain and the Morning Star. Navigator Paul's voice crackled through the communication system. We have maybe 6 hours before both ships lose atmosphere completely. Voss closed her eyes. 6 hours, 3,000 souls spread across 2 vessels. She had already lost 4 ships in the past week. The bodies still floated somewhere behind them in the darkness of space, frozen monuments to her failure. She made her way to the command center where the council had gathered. Elder Matriarch Un sat in the central chair, her ceremonial staff resting across her lap. The ancient spiritual leader looked as exhausted as Voss felt. Around her stood the other ship commanders, their faces hollow with hunger and fear. "We cannot continue like this," Captain Yara of the Distant Hope spoke first. "Our supplies will last perhaps 10 more days, fuel for maybe 12. We are dying slowly instead of quickly." "The Syndicate will find us eventually," another voice added. "They always do. They will not stop until every Dravani is either dead or in chains." Voss looked at the star map projected in the center of the room. Behind them lay Syndicate space, where their homeworld had been stripped of resources and their people had been marked for enslavement. Ahead lay only 3 possibilities. "We have 3 choices," she said. "We continue drifting and hope for a miracle that will not come. We surrender to the Syndicate and accept whatever fate they choose for us, or we enter the territory of the humans." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the struggling engines seemed to quiet. "The humans," Captain Yara whispered the word like a curse. "Admiral, you cannot." "Be serious." "I am completely serious." Elder Matriarch Un lifted her head. "What do we know of these humans?" Navigator Paul stepped forward, his young face tight with fear. "They come from a world called Earth, a death world. High gravity, extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, toxic atmosphere compared to most inhabited planets. The humans evolved there. They are survivors of an environment that would kill most species." "There are stories," Captain Yara said. "The Vorthan pirate armada numbered over 200 ships. They raided a human colony. None of the pirates survived. Not one ship escaped. The humans hunted them across 3 star systems and destroyed them all." "They are aggressive," another captain added. "Unpredictable, no species willingly enters human space. Those who do rarely return." "Then we will be the first," Elder Matriarch Un said quietly. All eyes turned to her. The old woman rose slowly, her staff clicking against the deck. "My children, I have lived for over 200 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves through fear and through pride. And I have learned one truth that age teaches all who pay attention." She paused, looking at each face in the room. "Certainty of death is worse than uncertainty of outcome. If we continue as we are, we die. If we surrender, we become slaves and then we die. But the humans," she gestured toward the star map. "The humans are unknown. Unknown means possibility. Unknown means a chance, however small." Admiral Voss nodded slowly. "I agree with the Elder Matriarch. We will send a distress signal into human-controlled space. We will state clearly that we are refugees, that we are unarmed, that we seek only safe passage or temporary shelter. Whatever happens next, at least we will have tried." Navigator Paul's hands trembled as he prepared the transmission. "What language should I use?" "All of them," Voss replied. "Every language in our database. Make certain they understand us." The young navigator worked in silence while the council watched. When he finished, He looked up at Admiral Voss with eyes full of fear and something that might have been hope. "Ready, Admiral." "Send it." The signal burst outward into the void, carrying the desperate plea of a dying people into territory that every species in the galaxy had learned to avoid. Then there was nothing to do but wait. Hours passed. The Council dispersed to their duties. Voss remained on the command deck, watching the sensor displays and trying not to think about the 3,000 people who would die when the gentle rain and the morning star lost their atmosphere. Admiral, Navigator Paul's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm detecting something." Voss moved to his station. "What is it?" "Hyperspace signatures, multiple contacts." His hands flew across the controls. "They're emerging from human space." "How many ships?" Paul looked up at her, his face pale. 63. "Admiral, there are 63 human vessels inbound, and they will reach us in less than 20 minutes. Voss stared at the display. 63 ships, more firepower than the entire Dravani fleet had possessed even before their homeworld fell. She had wanted uncertainty instead of certain death. Now she wondered if she had simply chosen a different kind of ending. The human ships approached through the darkness, and the Dravani could only watch and wait for whatever came next. The prayer halls aboard every Dravani ship had never been so full. Thousands knelt in silence, their heads bowed, their hearts racing as the human fleet drew closer. Some prayed for mercy, others prayed for a quick death. None prayed for victory because victory against humans existed only in dreams. Admiral Saren Voss stood alone on the observation deck of the Whisper of Dawn, watching the approaching vessels with all 4 of her arms pressed against the cold glass. The human ships moved with a precision that made her military mind ache with envy. Every vessel knew exactly where it needed to be. There was no hesitation, no confusion, no wasted movement. "Admiral," Navigator Paul's voice came through her personal communicator. "The human fleet is taking position around our convoy." "Attack formation." "No, Admiral, I don't understand it. They're spreading out in a sphere around us. Their weapons are powered down. It looks almost like—" He paused, struggling to find the words. "It looks like they're protecting us." Voss frowned. "Protecting us from what?" "I don't know." A new signal came through the communication system. A human face appeared on screens throughout the fleet. It was a woman with dark skin and eyes that seemed somehow gentle despite everything Voss had heard about her species. When she spoke, translation software converted her words into Dravani. "This is Ambassador Ruth Adebio of the United Human Confederacy. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. May we have permission to send aid to your vessels?" Voss stared at the screen. Permission. The humans were asking for permission. She made her way to the command center, where Elder Matriarch Un and the other commanders had gathered. The old woman was watching the human ambassador with an expression Voss could not read. "Admiral Voss," the ambassador continued, "we have detected critical life support failures on 2 of your ships. We have medical teams, engineers, and supplies ready to deploy. But we will not board your vessels without your consent. Please respond." Captain Yara turned to Voss. "This must be a trick." "Perhaps," Voss said. "But those 3,000 people on the Gentle Rain and Morning Star will die in 4 hours without help. Trick or not, we have no choice." She stepped forward to the communication panel. "Ambassador Adebio, this is Admiral Saren Voss of the Dravani refugee fleet. We accept your offer of assistance. Our people are dying." The ambassador's face softened. "Understood, Admiral. We are deploying immediately. Captain Petrova of the Stalwart will coordinate the rescue operations. Please do not be alarmed by the movement of our vessels." What happened next would remain burned in the memories of every Dravani who witnessed it. The human ships moved with incredible speed. Massive vessels that the Dravani had assumed were warships turned out to be something else entirely. They were hospital ships and mobile repair stations, their hulls opening to release swarms of smaller craft. Within an hour, human engineers were aboard the Gentle Rain and Morning Star. They worked alongside Dravani crews, speaking through translation devices, patching life support systems with equipment far more advanced than anything the refugees possessed. They brought food, water, and medicine. They treated the wounded without being asked. A human doctor named Samuel worked for 6 straight hours in the medical bay of the Gentle Rain. He saved 19 children who had been slowly suffocating from the failing air systems. When the last child was stable, he simply smiled, asked for a glass of water, and went to help the next patient. Admiral Voss watched the humans move through her fleet with growing confusion. They were efficient but not cold, professional but not distant. She observed a human engineer stop working on a power coupling to help an elderly Dravani woman find her missing grandson. The repair could have waited. The engineer seemed to think the grandmother could not. "I do not understand," Elder Matriarch Un said, standing beside Voss on the command deck. "These are the monsters we feared. These are the Deathworlders who destroyed entire fleets. Why do they bring us medicine instead of weapons?" "I do not know," Voss admitted. Ambassador Adebio requested to come aboard the Whisper of Dawn. Voss agreed, and an hour later she stood face to face with a human for the first time. The ambassador was shorter than Voss had expected, her body compact and dense with the muscle that high-gravity worlds produced. But her handshake was gentle, and her smile reached her eyes. "Admiral Voss, I want you to know that you and your people are safe now. Whatever you need, we will provide." "Why?" Voss asked. "Why help us? What do you want in return?" Ambassador Adebio tilted her head slightly. "We want you to survive. Is that not enough?" Before Voss could respond, Navigator Paul's voice cut through the moment. "Admiral, new contacts emerging from hyperspace, 31 vessels." His voice cracked with terror. "They are Syndicate hegemony warships. The hunters have found us." The ambassador's warm expression did not fade. It transformed. Something cold and hard appeared behind her eyes, something that reminded Voss why the galaxy feared humans. "Admiral Voss," Ambassador Adebio said calmly, "please tell your people to stay calm and remain aboard their vessels. We will handle this." She turned and began issuing orders in her own language, and the human fleet that had been so gentle moments before began to change into something else entirely. Silence had a weight to it. Commander Raxus of the Syndicate hegemony had learned this truth during his years of hunting escaped slaves across the galaxy. The silence before battle pressed down on everyone, making hearts race and hands tremble. He had always enjoyed watching lesser species crumble under that silence. But something was wrong today. His fleet of 31 warships hung in space before the Dravani convoy, weapons charged and ready. Victory should have been certain. The Dravani were broken refugees with no military capability. This should have been a simple collection operation. Instead, 63 human vessels stood between him and his prey. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "the humans are repositioning. They are forming a defensive line between us and the Dravani." Raxus studied the tactical display. The human ships moved like water, flowing into position with a coordination that seemed almost unnatural. Their weapons remained powered down, but something about their formation made his scales itch. "Open a channel to the Dravani flagship," he ordered. Admiral Saren Voss appeared on his screen. She looked different than the last time he had seen her, during the fall of the Dravani homeworld. There was steel in her eyes that had not been there before. "Admiral Voss," Raxus said pleasantly, "you have led us on quite a chase, but it ends here. Surrender your people, and I promise the transition to servitude will be," he smiled, "relatively painless." "I do not speak for the Dravani anymore, Commander," Voss replied. "You should address your demands to our hosts." The screen shifted, and Raxus found himself looking at a human woman. Ambassador Adebio's face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes held something that Raxus had never seen in any prey species. "Commander Raxus," she said, "I am Ambassador Ruth Adebio of the United Human Confederacy. The Dravani people are under our protection. You will withdraw your forces immediately." Raxus laughed. Protection. Forgive me, Ambassador, but I have 31 warships. You humans may be fearsome in stories, but stories do not win battles. Stand aside or be destroyed alongside these runaway slaves. We do not stand aside. A new voice joined the channel. The screen split to show a human male with gray hair and a face carved from stone. I am Fleet Admiral D. Sung Park. Commander, I am going to explain this once. These people asked us for help. We gave them our word. If you want them, you must come through us. And I promise you, Commander, we are very difficult to go through. You are outnumbered. Am I? Admiral Park smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Perhaps you should check your sensors again. Raxus turned to his sensor officer. The young subordinate's face had gone pale. Commander, 40 additional human contacts just emerged from hyperspace behind us. We are surrounded. Over 100 human warships now filled the tactical display. Raxus felt the first cold touch of fear. He pushed it aside. The Syndicate hegemony had built an empire on the backs of conquered species. He would not show weakness. You are bluffing. He said, no species risks war for strangers. What are these Dravani to you? Nothing. They are refugees, homeless wanderers. Why would you sacrifice your own people for them? Ambassador Adebyo answered, because they asked for help, because we could help, because turning away from suffering when you have the power to prevent it is something we refuse to do. These reasons may be difficult for you to understand, Commander, but they are the only reasons we need. Then you are fools. Perhaps, Admiral Park said, but we are fools with very large guns. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawing your fleet. After that, we will consider you hostile. And Commander, I want you to understand something very clearly. We have been practicing war since before your species learned to use fire. We have made an art form of it. We have rules now about how we fight because without those rules, we are capable of things that would give your nightmares nightmares. So please, Commander, give me a reason to show you what humans can do when we stop being polite. The channel went silent. Raxus stared at the tactical display. His fleet was surrounded. The humans had maneuvered with impossible precision, cutting off every escape route. He had walked into a trap without even realizing it. But surrender was not possible. The hegemony did not accept failure. If he retreated now, his own people would execute him for cowardice. All ships, he ordered. Attack formation, target the human defensive line. We break through or we die trying. His fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The first Syndicate missiles streaked toward the human ships. And the humans began to move. Admiral Voss watched from the whisper of dawn as the human fleet transformed from a defensive wall into something else entirely. They did not scatter or retreat. They flowed around the incoming fire like a river flowing around stones, and then they struck back. The first Syndicate ship lost its engines in a surgical strike so precise that Voss could barely follow it. The second lost its weapons array. The third simply went dark as every system aboard failed simultaneously. The humans were not fighting to destroy. They were fighting to disable. They were taking the Syndicate fleet apart piece by piece without killing a single crew. What are they doing? Navigator Paul whispered. Elder Matriarch Un stood beside him, watching the battle with ancient eyes. They are showing mercy, she said. Even to their enemies, these are very strange monsters indeed. The void between stars had never seen anything like this. Syndicate warships that had terrorized a dozen species now tumbled through space with darkened engines and silent weapons. Human vessels wove between them like predators playing with wounded prey, striking with surgical precision that should have been impossible. Commander Raxus watched his fleet being dismantled and felt something he had not experienced in 30 years of military service: helplessness. Targeting their command centers, his weapons officer reported, firing. The missiles launched. The human destroyer in their path simply was not there when the warheads arrived. It had moved with a speed that defied physics, slipping sideways and vanishing into the chaos of battle before reappearing behind a Syndicate cruiser. One shot later, that cruiser went dark. How are they doing this? Raxus demanded. Our targeting systems cannot track them. No one answered because no one knew. Aboard the Whisper of Dawn, Admiral Saren Voss watched the battle with growing amazement. Human ships moved as a single organism, each vessel knowing exactly where every other vessel would be moments before it arrived. They communicated through something faster than light, faster than thought, coordinating thousands of maneuvers without a single collision or friendly fire incident. "They are incredible," Navigator Paul breathed. "I have never seen anything like this." "No one has," Voss replied, "because no one has survived to describe it." The human flagship Unyielding Dawn sat at the center of the formation like the heart of a living creature. Fleet Admiral Park issued commands from its bridge, but the commands were not orders in any traditional sense. They were suggestions, possibilities, options that human captains interpreted and executed with their own judgment. It was chaos organized into something beautiful and terrible. Captain Lena Petrova's vessel, the Stalwart, took position at the front of the defensive line. 3 Syndicate destroyers focused their fire on her ship, recognizing it as a command vessel. The Stalwart shuddered under the assault, armor plates glowing red from repeated impacts. "Captain hull integrity at 60%, her first officer reported. "Recommend tactical withdrawal." "Negative," Petrova replied calmly. "There is a gap in our coverage if we move, Syndicate ships can reach the refugees. We hold position. We will not survive another concentrated barrage." "Then we will not survive, but they will not reach those people. Is that understood?" Her crew did not argue. They simply fought harder. Meanwhile, something extraordinary was happening aboard the Dravani ships. Human engineers continued their repair work even as battle raged around them. They did not evacuate to safety. They did not abandon their stations. They kept working, kept fixing, kept saving lives. Engineer David Wung was elbow-deep in a power conduit aboard the Gentle Rain when a Syndicate missile detonated nearby. The ship rocked violently, throwing him against the wall. He picked himself up, checked his equipment, and went back to work. "Are you injured?" a Dravani technician asked him. "I'm fine, hand me that coupling." "But the battle—" David looked up at her. "Those life support systems will fail in 2 hours if I don't fix them. 1,000 children are breathing that air. The battle is someone else's job. This is mine." He returned to his work. The Dravani technician stared at him for a long moment, then knelt beside him and began assisting without another word. The tide of battle turned slowly but inevitably. Commander Raxus had expected the humans to break under concentrated fire. Instead, they adapted, shifted, and countered every tactic he employed. When he tried to concentrate his forces, they scattered and picked him apart. When he tried to spread out, they isolated and disabled his ships one by one. Half of his fleet was now drifting without power. The other half was running out of options. "Commander," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the human flagship." Fleet Admiral Park appeared on screen. His face was patient, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. "Commander Raxus, half of your ships are disabled. Your fleet has suffered 93 casualties. We have suffered 27. At this rate, you will have nothing left within the hour. I am giving you one final opportunity to surrender." Raxus felt rage burning in his chest. The hegemony does not surrender. "Then your crews will die for nothing. Is your pride worth their lives?" The question hung in the air. Raxus looked at his tactical display. His remaining ships were damaged, exhausted, outmaneuvered. Continuing the battle would accomplish nothing except more death. But he had one card left to play. "Admiral Park, I have a proposal. Let me withdraw my remaining forces in peace. In exchange, I will not transmit the location of this fleet to Hegemony Command. If I do transmit, 300 warships will arrive within days. Not even humans can fight those numbers." Park's expression did not change. "You are threatening to call for reinforcements. I am offering you a choice. Let me go or face the full might of the Syndicate hegemony." The human admiral was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. "Commander, I want you to listen very carefully. If you call for reinforcements, we will fight them. If you call for 1,000 ships, we will fight them. We gave these people our word. We do not break our word, so call whoever you want. We will be here when they arrive, and we will still be here when they leave. That is not a threat, Commander. It is simply who we are." Raxus stared at the screen. For the first time, he understood why the galaxy feared humans. It was not their weapons or their tactics. It was their absolute, unshakable refusal to abandon those they had chosen to protect. He had no response, and in that silence he realized the battle was already lost. 3 weeks had passed since the battle. Commander Raxus sat in a human detention cell, watching the stars through a small window and wondering how everything had gone so wrong. His surviving ships had surrendered within hours of his final exchange with Admiral Park. The crews had been separated from their weapons but treated with dignity. No one had been tortured. No one had been executed. The humans simply contained them and moved on. The Dravani refugee fleet traveled deeper into human space, escorted by vessels that had transformed from terrifying warships into something like guardian angels. Human doctors continued treating the sick and injured. Human engineers continued repairing damaged ships. Human soldiers who could have conquered worlds instead spent their time helping elderly Dravani carry their belongings from failing vessels to functional ones. Admiral Saren Voss stood on the observation deck of the Whisper of Dawn, watching a human cargo ship distribute food supplies to the convoy. She had stopped trying to understand these strange creatures. She had simply accepted that everything she thought she knew about them was wrong. Admiral Ambassador Adebio approached, her boots clicking against the deck. "We will arrive at New Bristol tomorrow." New Bristol. A colony world. Temperate climate, abundant water, rich soil. We have prepared a settlement zone for your people. Temporary housing is already constructed, and permanent infrastructure will follow. You will have everything you need to begin again. Voss turned to face her. "And what do you require in return?" The ambassador smiled. "Nothing. Your people have suffered enough. They deserve a chance to heal without conditions attached." "That is not how the galaxy works." "No, but perhaps it should be." The fleet arrived at New Bristol the following day. The planet hung in space like a blue and green jewel, so similar to the Dravani homeworld that many refugees wept simply looking at it. Human ships guided them into orbit, and then the shuttles began their descent. Elder Matriarch Un was among the first to set foot on solid ground. She had carried a small container throughout the entire journey, protecting it with her life. Now she opened it and removed a single seed from within. "This comes from the last tree that grew in our capital city," she explained to the human officials who had gathered to welcome them. "It was planted by my grandmother's grandmother. I thought it had been lost forever." She knelt in the soft earth and placed the seed in the ground. Human agricultural specialists immediately offered to help ensure it would grow. Dravani children gathered around to watch. For a moment, there was no difference between the two species. There was only hope. Fleet Admiral Park met privately with Admiral Voss later that evening. They sat in a simple prefabricated building, drinking tea that a human aide had prepared. "I want to be honest with you," Park said. "Humans are not saints. We have wars, prejudice, cruelty. Our history is filled with terrible things we did to each other and to our world. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once." "Then why do you help strangers?" "Because we learned that strength used only for conquest eventually turns inward and destroys the conqueror. We learned that the species who shares their fire with strangers has more friends than the species who hoards it. And we learned that protecting others makes us better than protecting only ourselves." He paused. "We are still learning. Every day we are not perfect, but we are trying." Voss considered his words. "The Syndicate will not forget this. They will send more ships." "Yes. You will be at war." "We are already at war. We have been at war since the moment we gave you our word. That is what a promise means." Ambassador Adebio arrived with news. The Dravani would be offered a choice. remain as protected refugees under human care, or join the human confederacy as partners and allies. They would receive training, technology, and support to rebuild their civilization. In exchange, they would contribute their knowledge, their culture, and their strength to the greater whole. Admiral Voss did not need to consult the council. We accept. Months passed. The settlement grew. Dravani and human children attended school together, learning each other's languages and histories. Navigator Paul enrolled in a human military academy, training alongside officers from a dozen species who had found shelter under human protection. He discovered that he was not the only one who had once feared humanity. He was simply among the most recent to learn the truth. Word spread across the galaxy. The Deathworlders of Earth did not simply conquer. They protected. They built. They welcomed the lost and defended the weak. Other refugee species began sending cautious signals toward human space, wondering if the stories were true. The stories were true. 1 year after their arrival, the Dravani held a ceremony to celebrate the anniversary of their rescue. Elder Matriarch Un stood before a crowd of humans, and Dravani gathered beneath the branches of a young tree that had grown from her grandmother's seed. "We came to human space expecting death," she said. "We had heard stories of monsters, of destroyers, of creatures who knew only war. We were wrong." She looked at Ambassador Adebio and Fleet Admiral Park, who stood among the crowd. "We sought refuge from humans. They answered with leaders who spoke kindness, with engineers who built hope, and with warships that became our shield. We came as strangers. We leave as family." Navigator Paul stood at the back of the gathering, watching the celebration. A human cadet named Sarah stood beside him, someone he had met during training. She had asked about his people, listened to their stories, shared meals from both cultures. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Paul remembered the terror he had felt when human ships first appeared on his sensors. He remembered certain that death had come for them. He smiled at how wrong he had been. "I am thinking," he said, "that the galaxy tells many stories about humans, but the most important story is the one they told us, that you will never abandon those who ask for help. That is the story I will tell my children someday." Sarah smiled. "Good, make sure they know we mean it." Above them, human and Dravani flags flew side by side in the wind. And somewhere across the stars, other refugees were gathering their courage to send their own signals into human space. Help was coming. It always would be.